Hi all.
Oh, well, hello. Um,
Hi Nathan.
yeah, hey, I see we have a few people on. Hey, Balakrishna. Looks like we have Gerald and Gail as well.
Yes.
Yeah,
Oh,
hi there.
yeah, hi. Hope everyone's having a good day. And thank you for joining. I think we may have a few people still trickling in, but we're a few minutes after, and so it might be good to maybe get started here.
Hi, this is my
Yeah,
first time
makes sense.
dialing in. I'm just here to observe and kind of lurk.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. That's perfectly acceptable and expected. So but thank you for joining. By introductions, I don't think I've met at least a couple of you before. I'm Nathan Kumagai. I work with Qualcomm, but I'm serving as the education chair and trying to pick up where the great work that Balakrishna had left off. And so I think the intention for these meetings is often to, get feedback. First of all, the insight that people bring certainly is the most valuable about, what materials are useful. There's a kind of a limited amount of effort, I think, that from the community that we can kind of focus together, and we want to make sure we're putting that toward the best things. But we also know that, a lot of the material that we've created has been very useful for people as they've, done work in their organization and, help promote these principles and the needs for OpenChain, within their organization or within their partners. So we want to be doing things that are helping people, and the input from folks such as yourselves is extremely helpful. So, good to meet you all here. So thanks, Gail, for saying hi. Would anyone else like to introduce themselves?
Yeah, I think I'll go next.
Okay.
Hi all. I'm Balakrishna. I've been part of OpenChain for about past 5 years now, I guess, and I have about 9+ years experience now with open source compliance, 8+ years experience with open source compliance, and the rest with something else, development and testing and stuff. So previously I was working with Bosch, and now I've moved to a new organization called Pegasystems, and I'm setting up the entire open source, more or less an OSPO office here. Yeah, that's about me. And yeah, Nathan, we are at least I'm quite excited to work with you on your new initiatives and looking forward to all the activities that are coming up.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I very much as well for me. So.
Shall I just say hi? I'm Gerald O'Sullivan. I'm joining you guys from South Africa, from Pretoria in South Africa. I haven't been involved in the project as long as Balakrishna. In fact, I haven't just got involved since last year. So I have been pretty much a lurker until now, but I really hope to change that this coming year, 2023, and be a more active participant in this work stream. And I'd just also like to, thank you guys, Nathan and Balakrishna, because I have seen you guys do a hell of a lot of work, and it's quite heartening and quite impressive.
Yes, well, Gerald, thanks for good to have you back here. Thanks for your introduction. Otherwise, I see one Musa. Welcome as well.
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Okay, yeah. So I'm just I'm in UK. So I work as an accreditor, to use the old terms. So I'm sort of moving into a different company as what we call SAC, so a security assurance coordinator. So that's a bigger role. So I've been too much into Ministry of Defense, in and around government, also departments doing the same assurance. So I saw the OpenChain, and it's very interesting. And like everyone else, I just want to see how I could use it, especially going to a new responsible position. So yeah, just waiting to see how I could use this OpenChain.
Okay, well, thank you for joining and welcome here as well. So. Okay, so I suppose we can dive in. I think one of the things I'm trying to do, at least at the beginning, is try to get organized in a way that's helpful for people. You know, trying to figure out a way where we can all collaborate in real-time editing. You know, I'm starting out with the approach for using Google Docs. I think we'll post a couple links into the chat window here. The first is going to be what I'm trying to establish is maybe the master document where we'll list our group priorities, and then we can work off of that. And that should have links to all the editable versions of documents that are available to others. And then the second document I'll post will be, well, we hopefully can take a run through and get some discussion on today as well. Shane had asked if we'd take a look at the FAQ and just get some direction there. You know, if we can get some feedback, you know, thoughts from direction, what people would like to see in these documents, you know, that will, you know, I think we can have some great discussion there. So if that works, I will maybe begin with introducing the first document. I can share my screen.
That sounds good.
Okay.
And Nathan, just one experience which I would like to share one of my experience with respect to identifying a collaboration medium or a document where we want to collaborate. It's always a hard place, you know. We tried this last year as well. We wanted to figure out if we could use Google Docs more easily, or if we could use Microsoft OneDrive document, Microsoft Online 365 Word, something. We tried all those things. Microsoft 365 always ended up asking us for a license after a couple of trials, and Google Docs is not accessible in a couple of regions. So it was always a problem. So what we did was, since Google Docs was majoritarily accessible across the world, for the regions where Google Docs was not accessible, we were just sharing across a copy of our work on an email as a summary of that week's activity. This is one thing what we were doing. But if we can find something that would be accessible across regions without any license issues or anything, that it would be amazing.
Yes. Oh, well, thank you for that. Yeah, I think we've been struggling very much with the same kind of thoughts. And so, yeah, I think if that sounds good, I'll continue with your approach. We'll at least start with the Google Docs, and I can send out, you know, a viewable version for, you know, for all places.
Yeah.
Yep.
And Shane was taking care of, if at all we would get any comments from the hard copy, which the email copy what we were sharing, then Shane was kind enough to bring in all the comments onto the Google Docs document.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think, yeah, that's best thing, I think, is to build on what you've done. So I will talk to Shane, and I think we'll continue doing that. So
sounds good.
So just as far as priorities here, I'm sharing this screen here. You know, I think, as Gerald knows, we had a nice talk last meeting, talking about what's the best kind of things to start with. One of the places that people found helpful is the path to conformance. And what this did is really organize the material that we have into, you know, categories that are useful based on what your goal is. You know, if you're here to learn about open source, you know, help people in your organization understand why open source is important. You know, perhaps you're trying to you know, sell your leaders on, you know, your you know, the role or the job that you're trying to do. You know, there's that kind of level, and then we get to people who are trying to who already have that kind of in hand and are you know, trying to learn about OpenChain and how OpenChain can be a solution to the issues that they know about. And then finally, you know, there's some logistical questions about how do you comply? You know, how do you register your conformance and then publicize that as well? So, you we have some suggestions there. And then what I did was I listed at least what I thought were some of the most mature and widely used documents. Would love it if anyone had any suggestions about, hey, I like this one, let's prioritize that, or hey, you're missing a document that was really useful to me. Let's add that here so it can get some attention and stay current. We would love to have that input. So why don't I take a pause there, and then if there's, this is, by the way, the first document I put into the chat link. And so why don't I pause there and see if there's any feedback or thoughts that anyone has, before I skip on to head to anything else.
If there's a voting like thing that's happening, then I think I would vote for the supplier leaflet, because
Yeah.
with my current organization as well, I find a lot of use for the supplier leaflet, and having that in Markdown, I think it would help us, and enhancing it further also would help us a lot.
Okay. Let me just go ahead and grab the, I think it's this one right here, right?
Yes.
Okay.
It's already in Markdown. Awesome.
I think it's already, yeah. Okay, so this must be the most current version here. Okay. Well, I will drop in a link into our document here, and then I will get an editable version together. So back. Okay. Yeah, thank you for that input. Anyone else have any thoughts about the top documents or the priorities that we should be focusing on?
I'm not sure if this is a comment or a question, Nathan. I think you can take it either way. I just wanted to understand, the education group is just looking at OpenChain and just the specification itself, rather than looking at the security-related elements of because we've got this kind of parallel project looking at the security. The reason why I'm raising this is because a lot of people I've spoken to so far kind of conflate the two to say, is OpenChain about cybersecurity? And I'm trying to say, well, it kind of is and it kind of isn't. I'm not sure whether to put together something which could elaborate on how they are different, but how they interlock and support each other. The issue of cybersecurity and being aware of what's in your chain, your supply chain, and how OpenChain can help you to feel more secure about your sourcing of components.
Yeah,
as I said, I'm not sure if it's a question or a comment.
Well, it's a very good point. I think that's one of the reasons Shane asked us to dig into the FAQ a little bit, because there are a couple questions there that I think people are asking the same thing. They're like, what is OpenChain? What's the difference between the specifications, and how do I get information on either one, or know the difference? And so, I do have a little bit of content. I think we can, if we can answer that question, I think that would be pretty productive here.
Yeah.
Was there any, can I just ask, do you have any of the security resources or anything that we, actually perhaps what we need is some security versions of a lot of these as well, right?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
And Gerald, if I understood your question properly, I think one thing what I understand from OpenChain is it does touch upon the cybersecurity part. That is, any open source packages you consume into your organization or your products, right? It has to be compliant with certain areas. Initially, OpenChain was concentrating more on compliance on the consumption area and contribution area. And ever since the security assurance part was also introduced, I think that more touches towards the cybersecurity part. If you are compliant with the security assurance as well, security assurance part as well, which OpenChain worked on, then it would make you a little more stronger towards achieving cybersecurity. I'm not saying you would be 100% secure on that region, but it helps you, right? You get to know what open source components you are using. You will know what are the prerequisites or the bare minimum you need to do to achieve compliance over there. You can figure out what components you're using and how to tackle the vulnerabilities that might be causing any sort of cybersecurity risk for your product or organization. So it does touch upon it, but not in depth, of course.
Yes, yes. No, I totally agree with you. It's just that when you go to some of the, try to explain to people what is OpenChain. I mean, initially I was thinking, it's about managing licenses, about managing IP, and making sure that you understand the copyright ownership of the code under your command. But then people say, but what about cybersecurity? How does that? And you're right, it does help with that, but it's also slightly separate. So I think to try to get the overlap and then to identify where the fault lines are between the two projects would be helpful for both projects.
Yeah, the security assurance part on OpenChain can be a good starting point for you. And then after that, anyway, we have our sister projects from Linux Foundation, that is OpenSSF. Those things can help you further move ahead towards strengthening your cybersecurity part. But yes, OpenChain is actually a good part for you to begin with, which will gradually be bridge over to move towards the other standards that are also being conducted by Linux Foundation sister projects.
Yes,
okay.
yeah.
And this might be a good time. And by the way, let me welcome Chris Wood. So thank you for joining, Chris. And I just want to make sure you're able to see the links in the chat window. We're looking at the first one about the education group priorities.
Hi, Chris.
So, and maybe Chris might not be at a place where you can unmute, but welcome, Chris. And let me, if you need any of these links, just please, chime in or write in, but it should be in the chat window for you to see. But Balakrishna and Gerald, should we, unless anyone has any other feedback, we could move over to the FAQ, because these are the exact kind of questions I think Shane would think is helpful for us to answer right now. So, perhaps I'll switch over to that. Yeah. I know with the path to conformance, I had copied over.
Sorry, I lost your voice there. There was some bandwidth issue.
Oh, sorry, Balakrishna. I think what I was just going to say was, like, if it's okay, let's move over to the FAQ, because I think the questions you're raising are exactly things that we need to address in the FAQ. So I don't want to lose the points that you're making here. Okay, so a couple of questions here. What are the benefits of using the OpenChain specifications for license security compliance? Shane had noted we're lumping together compliance and security, so we need to make sure that those things differ. And then how do we conform to the two specifications? How do we support the adoption of them? We kind of have similar answers for these, similar content, but how about I pause here? I think, let me just copy in some of the points we made. And we'll find a place for the content that we're creating here. Also, I think, please let me know if anyone has this document open. I think I should have this as editable for everyone.
Unfortunately, I do not have a laptop accessible right now, and I'm on my phone, so I can't edit it right now, but I will take a look into it as soon as I get access to my laptop.
Oh, sure. Okay, and if something's too small, we can read it out as well.
Yeah. No, I can see this.
Okay.
To view it, fine.
Okay. All right, so I took this from some of the intro material from the security assurance spec. But I think question we're really getting at is, what is the overlap, between the two specs? And Balakrishna, I think you had a couple of thoughts as well that I may not have captured, but a lot of the same processes go into the, underlie both specifications, right?
Yeah, technically they're more. It's more or less like the sibling activities, right? OpenChain, it introduces you to do the package management as one part of the license compliance activity. So if you have to do package management, you should be aware of your open source inventory. If you're aware of your open source inventory, then you can track down your security vulnerabilities. So these can be the overlapping specs between the cyber security compliance or the security compliance overall, and on the license compliance part. So that is where OpenChain would overlap on top of the other standards that are there in the market.
Okay. So I'm going to try to capture some of these principles here. License compliance, and we can clean up the language here. Else with packages, right?
Should we drill down to issues of software bill of materials and things like SPDX and stuff like that, or was it going to be too much for the FAQ?
Perhaps I think some examples can help for the FAQ, right? To illustrate, to illustrate the principle here. So you can, so Balakrishna, you're saying you can build on tracking open source projects to, security vulnerabilities, right?
Yes.
Okay. So like, Gerald, do you see another way that the two specs interact?
I think just, I think we have touched on it. I was just wondering, I mean, right, as you said, maybe put some examples of how a format like SPDX would help you with a kind of standard definition of your software packages, which will support both your security assurance as well as your OpenChain compliance. So that would definitely be an overlap there.
Okay. Both sides. Okay, and then I think we clarify though, but you can choose to focus on one or the other, right? Or the other, right? So you're not required to, if you want to do the security one, you're not required to conform to the license one, right? Or or declare conformance, etc. Right?
Do you mean on the conformance process what we have in OpenChain, or is it are you talking about the in general practice?
I think in general, if like, say, for instance, your job more focuses on security, you can just focus on the security spec, and there you don't have to worry about what's in the license spec if your focus is just the security side.
Yeah, that's true. But all the new age tools that are in the market right now, if you are doing a security vulnerability scan for all your open source components, it by default lists out the licenses as well. So anyway, the tool is taking care of it for us, even if we are only towards security assurance or security compliance part.
Okay, so maybe the point is you can focus on one or the other, but compliance with one side, so it takes you a substantial way toward the other, right?
I wonder if it would help if we identify the stakeholders that are being addressed. I mean, license compliance would be of more interest to your legal folk who are worrying about copyright issues and software licensing. Your risk officer would obviously be interested in both, and then your CSO would be much more interested in the security issues.
Yeah.
So just to perhaps elevate the fact that we talk to two different groups of stakeholders.
Yeah. And sometimes it's different teams, right, that have the responsibilities, right, for carrying. So I think there they're intended to be standalone in the way that you can work with one or the other, but they do mutually support each other.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, so I think we have some good content there, unless anyone else has any other thoughts to add. I did want to ask Balakrishna about the partner projects. At some place, I think it is valuable, and what I wish at some point we have is like a mapping of kind of where OpenChain fits with other partner sister specs or projects. But do you have is OpenSSF, are there any other security? I'm sure there's a long list, right? But is there anything like I can list offhand as a couple examples here?
Nothing is on top of my head, but I don't know. I'm not able to recall anything, but yes, there are.
Okay. Okay. So for the other two questions, I dug up some info from some of the security documentation, and I think these applied kind of equally to both sides. How do you conform to both specs? It's typically the same kind of process at least for OpenChain's expectations. It's typically a self-certification process, and on both sides we have service providers though that will help you. And then we do have community resources in these work groups that can kind of help drill into questions when you have questions about, maybe what a term means or best practice to implement something.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we tackled that question that was raised. Why don't I go back to the beginning here and let's kind of walk through and see what perhaps we can highlight or just call out areas we think are maybe outdated or we need updates to. So for instance, Shane has updated this so that we're referring to both of the specifications. I think in some cases we still have the assumption only the license one is still around.
The license spec is the one that's covered by 5320.
Yep.
The software assurance or security assurance risk specification has been submitted to ISO IEC for approval, but it will have a separate spec number.
Okay. No, thank you, Chris. Hey, Chris, by the way, do you know what timeline they're kind of on? Do you know when we would expect that to come out as an ISO?
When I was talking to Shane the other day, he was thinking somewhere around the fourth quarter, maybe of this year. I'm hoping it'll be earlier. I'm a member of the ISO IEC working groups, and I'm going to look into it and see if I can find that spec and see where they are in the review process. But because I was part of the creation of it, I'm going to remain hands off. I don't want them to think that I'm trying to pull a quick one.
Sure. Okay.
No.
Well, it's cool to have you there though. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I'm just having a little difficulty understanding everybody. I'm going to have to invest in another set of speakers to see if I can find one that carries the Zoom call vocals a little bit better.
Yes. I probably could, if I connected up to my my headset or something. If you're having trouble understanding me, I can try to do that next time as well. Okay, so I think the foundational questions in the FAQ are here. This points us to the project charter, and I think my only thought here was, you know, is there a better landing spot maybe than the, this takes us right into the GitHub site and where you have to click into some version of one of the documents. So, you know, so maybe a landing page in the website.
Yeah.
And then please, I'm just going to kind of start to go through at a leisurely pace here, but please stop me if you have thoughts here. So. Yeah, I think this is fairly high level, and I think it still makes sense. Like, what does the project cover? And so we point to the list of people who are compliant or declaring compliance. This question, is tricky. I think, how do we organize? Because I think there's been some kind of movement on this. I think this community link is, I'd open this here, and I think that one's fairly current. Actually, there was one other link I think that might have been helpful here. Perhaps this one, the participate one.
Yeah.
In fact, I think that might be the better one to raise instead of community. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, I would think that might be better.
Okay. So.
I think the important thing for everybody to consider and maybe comment on it at some point later is that really to be OpenChain compliant at a higher level, you're really going to have to be both compliant with the licensing spec and the security spec, because in actuality in the marketplace, they go hand in hand. It's so nobody's going to care if you're fully compliant with a license spec if you can't demonstrate that you're also compliant with security, and vice versa. And I think that that's the way the two specs will eventually be linked. But because we want to stay in a prescriptive mode rather than in a I don't know what you want to call it, a directive mode. It still needs to be each organization, and the discussion really needs to be held at the organizational level, whether it's an open source project level, I'm having trouble coming up with an immediate open source project, but at either the project level, or if you're a supplier or a vendor, it needs to be more at the upper levels and not at the individual team levels for security and licensing, because they're not always co-located and do the work at the same time. So I think that in those at the lower levels, they can work them independently and become compliant, and then the company can declare that they're compliant with the OpenChain licensing compliance specification, or and that's something we probably need to talk about at the OpenChain level, is what is going to be OpenChain compliant in the future for some of the higher levels of compliance. Is that compliant with both specifications, yes or no? And I think it's something that Shane will probably have to lead us in.
Chris, my sense was that if you'd made it to the security specification or compliant with there, you've probably put in all the principles you need for the license side, but probably not the reverse, though.
Yeah, it depends on what scanners you're using and what the people who are reviewing the scans actually have a skill set in. Because looking at the security and vulnerability scanning is a totally different skill set than looking at the licensing side. So even though some scanners do both scans at the same time, they need a different skill set of people to look at them to determine whether or not the scans is, you know, if it's a positive or a false positive, or you know, what the finding is. Because a lot of times there's some errors in the scanning that we just need to account for, but we can't in a blanket mode say that all scanners are equal, because they're not. For example, in my company, we're running 2 scanners side by side, looking at the differences in the licensing and the vulnerabilities that might come up.
Yeah, you know, maybe a question too, if well, Krishna had raised the, yeah, I'll skip down to here for a moment here. You know, the question about security partner projects. You know, we talked about what's the overlap between our 2 specs, you know, and I wonder if there's any, is there any insight you might have to overlap with other kind of security specifications? Does, you know, like the license spec says, you know, gives you an idea about the process that you need to put in place, whereas other partner specs talk about, hey, what kind of format might you use, like SPDX, right? Is there another distinction that's similar in the security side, you know, with our spec and partner projects?
Well, there is, but we didn't develop that spec with the thought of you know, what other things might be out there, more as it was more of a look at what do you really need from our perspective in order to be assured that you have identified all of the vulnerabilities and risks in the software. So yeah, there probably are. In fact, I know there are. NIST has got quite a few security specs, and there are some other specifications out there from Europe that are also talking about security. So we just need to take a look at those if you want to reference some.
Okay.
Yeah, I think there's NTIA, there's Open Forum, something like that, right? I'm not sure. It's just I've heard some, not been involved directly, but yeah, there are something like this.
I mean, do you know, are they process focused, or are they approaching it a different way?
So as Chris mentioned, right now NIST and NTIA, they're more about process focused and what is the expectation or the outcome.
Okay.
I might be wrong. I mean, if I'm wrong, please do correct me.
No, I think you're right. NIST is trying to remain very prescriptive in saying you should do these things. The IEEE also has specifications on security and whatnot and licensing. And I know that IEEE specifications are always very prescriptive, or they try to be. And that's one of their goals that they've been honing in on in the last few years, more specifically.
Okay, let's see here. Well, I'll go back to where we left off here. Here we are. Okay, so I think here we called out, at least pointed people to the participation link. We named some of the major committees, but I do think the participation link does a pretty good job now of calling forward our communities, so they're not buried.
Nathan, do you not think the just aren't we conflating out the participation? Here we're talking about the community and how people can get involved, but we sort of buried away the governing board and how the project itself is governed. Should that not be elevated to a question in its own right? I mean, how the OpenChain project is organized at the highest level, just to say where does the mandate derive from, and how is accountability structured, and then dive into the work groups. Just keep them slightly separate.
Yeah, you know what, I'm seeing that too. I think you're right. Like work groups are more the participation mode, right? And perhaps those should be more in this question.
Yes, yeah.
And then yeah, and then here we can talk about, so it's how is it organized or governed? Maybe, yeah, then we leave the community link for this one then. If that sounds good, I'm gonna move those over then. So we can work on a proper intro here, but I think, let's see here. This is where we need that participation link here.
Agreed, yeah.
Okay, so we need that there. And then we need a good like intro here, right, to what is the community organization, and then we can talk about the governing boards and the committees, right? I think we need to update perhaps these. I think let's see here. Okay, so I'll check on the community organization, just make sure that's current, right? Current. Okay, so then we have a how to participate, and then we have a how are things organized. I think that makes sense.
Yeah. Which also kind of prompted me to wonder, should we not have a kind of history or a background? How did it even come about? What is the background to the both projects, both standards, both specifications? How did the OpenChain project come about?
Okay.
That'll necessarily
that
then
would be
touch
another
on
question, right?
Yes, yeah.
Get started, something like that. Originate.
Yes, yeah. Because that would also then touch on what was the original need for the specification, and then you immediately start to understand, this is the kind of gap that it was trying to plug, and this is how it does actually plug it in practice.
So then this is how we talk about our kind of process approach, right? The how is up to the right, is up to the individual company, right?
Yeah.
Determined by the right.
Yeah, you might want to use the word organization there, because some of them will be organizations, not actual companies.
Yeah. Okay. Good point. Yeah.
I remember sometime in the past there was a discussion where there were discussions where there was a mention about having a universal standard which every other organization could understand, because if we look at each individual organization as a silo, everyone has their own standard of compliance in terms of open source compliance, be it security or license. So all of there was a need for a common language so that everyone could understand.
Okay.
More like a universal standard kind of thing.
Okay.
And that's where the ISO played a major role for us. I think that was one point of celebration as well when the ISO
Yeah.
was finalized 5230.
Okay. It's major achievement, right? And here we kind of get into like maybe some of the supply chain recognition of supply chain needs, right? Of
True.
duplication of work, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
You might
Is
want to
this
mention you might want to mention some of the issues around supply chain poisoning. You know, some of these packages, for example, in Node that have been, you know, just to give concrete examples of the kinds of supply chain issues you might confront.
okay? Through the okay. Samples, right? Okay. I think, is this a good place for that question then? Just seeing if I was wondering if it should come a little earlier, maybe after this question here.
I think it should be earlier as well.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Oh, sorry. Does that place look good?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so let's see. We have next, can my company become an OpenChain member? I do kind of think this one should be next to organization. Well, how would people feel if I moved, kind of switched this participate and the organization one around? Or I could take this content and drop it into, yeah. I don't know. What do you think? Or is it fine where it's at?
I have no opinion on the placement.
Okay.
Yeah, I suppose the difference is, you know, do you want to try and invite participation earlier on in the FAQ? You know, have a kind of call to arms earlier in the FAQ, or sort of, do you want to entice people into the issues and then say this is how you get involved, and then this is us, then go to this is our structure, this is how we are constituted. It can be attended. Yeah.
I like that. If that's a plus vote or 1 plus vote there, I can. I think I agree. And then you can go from how is it organized, and then basically how do you get involved in that organization part, the governing part of it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. And by the way, this whole call to participate, you know, I'd really love to promote this to even the front page. You know, we would like to lower the bar of participation as much as possible, you know, invite people to, I think there is some hesitancy to sometimes join a call, right? Or even if it's a small group, it's nice to be able to kind of watch and learn and listen in, and you know, we should make it clear that that's, you know, entirely, you know, acceptable. If you want to, you know, hop on a call or member call or something like that, and just listen in. You know, I do actually, their recordings are available too, and so I think that can be helpful. But it's I think there's one kind of level of growth when we can start to get people who are participating, you know, and starting adding to the community and contributing, you know, resources that they have. You know, I think one of our to-dos as a group, I think, should be to kind of encourage submission of material and you know, kind of adding to the wealth of knowledge that we have as a community. So
That's a good idea.
yeah, off my soapbox then again, and back to the document though. So okay, actually here is where, yeah, OpenSSF is mentioned. Actually, this might address Balakrishna, your point from below.
I'm sorry, I'm not getting it.
Oh, sorry. I think they do mention OpenSSF here. How do we relate to other Linux Foundation process projects?
Oh yeah, this answers the question. Yes.
Yep.
And there's the next question, which also helps us understand a little more better.
Yeah. Okay, actually, that's super helpful for me as well. So I'm glad, yeah, I'm glad that's there. So
Now, see, on that one, we probably ought to have something about, that's the licensing specification so that people are clear which one it is.
okay.
See where it says OpenChain ISO/IEC 5320.
Yeah.
That might be a good place to actually just put the name of the specification in there.
Okay. Name of spec. Okay. So so it's clear that, yeah, this is the licensing principles. And so I think the next set here, right, is just about the licensing side. Perhaps what we ask here is, do we need the, you know, security list of questions, right? Let me just put a parking place for those if that's what we decide as we go through these.
Yeah, that'd be a good idea.
Yeah. Okay, so maybe, you know, I think we have 5 minutes left. I think maybe a good call out is can we call out? I mean, to me, it almost seems like almost all of these we need the equivalent question, right? What is the objective? Where can I find the current version?
Yes.
Yeah, maybe, you know, Chris or someone, do you have like a quick objective answer for the security one? Like what would be the, is it similar? It's like process requirements for security, or is that kind of, or do you think?
It's what we were trying to do was outline the processes that someone could go through in order to feel assured that they're covering their security properly, their software security.
Okay.
I don't want to get that confused with building security or physical security.
Okay. So I'll start to copy a list of questions below, but I'll start using some input here to fill in initial questions. Okay, so current version, we can find that. Does an open source program need to satisfy all the requirements? Yeah, I think we'll end up having a similar answer there. Is all the software. Okay, so these are pretty, you know, license compliance focused questions.
Yeah, I think we need to touch base with Shannon.
Yeah.
and see what he thinks about that.
Okay.
When we're talking about overall arching compliance from an open chain perspective in the future, because I'm sure that ISO IEC is probably going to assign a different number to the software assurance one when it's approved. So we just need to think about that from a overarching ideas. How do we address the different specs when we only really have one, and then we've got our open chain specification, which is submitted for ISO approval, but isn't there yet.
Yeah. Can I ask you, I think you broke up just a little bit at the beginning. Who did you say to check in with?
With Shane.
Oh, with Shane. Okay. By the way, Balakrishna, I think our kind of like a little bit of history is here in this question, but I don't think we're not getting into the kind of philosophy and approach of why though, and why it was created. So I think our question initially above, or that we put above, is still very relevant. So
Yeah.
And I think, if you ask that question, I think Shane would be able to answer that even more beautifully, because he's been there from scratch, or even Dave Mark probably.
Yeah. This is OpenChain. Okay. Yeah, and I'm guessing there'll be some kind of like security similar questions, like does it describe how to comply with, a NIST requirement or et cetera, right? So we might have some similar questions that we could use some answers in support from the security side of the community to provide those answers.
Yes.
Yep.
We held a short meeting. Let's see, I guess it was Wednesday night or something, and we talked briefly about more of the security stuff, and we've got some other questions that we need to answer internally amongst ourselves. And what I'm talking about is the team that's working on that, in that process.
Okay. Yeah, so that would be a great team for us to pitch some questions to too, if we can. So okay, so looks like we are out of time. I want to thank you all for joining, and I think we got some great input here. So very much appreciate the input from everyone here in the community, and I think that's how we get the best stuff that we need for our project. So thank you again. Enjoyed talking to you all, and I will send out a follow-up email with notes on where we've gotten here, and talk to Shane about getting, starting to get Word documents together so we can more easily share with other parts of the community. So
Yeah,
Thank you, Nathan. Thank you all.
if you have
sorry, Chris, go ahead. Gerald? Sorry.
If you have a kind of a preliminary list you could pick off of there of some of the open security questions, then we can bring them to the security work group and talk through them and see what our general consensus is for answers.
Okay. Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you. I will plan on doing that. So yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you. All right. I look forward to chatting with you more in the future. So and hope you all have a good day. So
You the same.
all right.
Thanks. You too.
All right.
Cheers, everybody. Bye-bye.